this morning's broadcast of News and Views right here on Salam Media. If you have joined us, Juma Mubarak, and we welcome you. This hour of News and Views is sponsored by Africa Muslims Agency. Africa Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years in Africa and beyond. Well, it's time now to take a look at a book launch, and this is quite interesting. We are talking about a book which is called Cultivating an Ethics of Beauty and Excellence in Planetary Times and Engaged Muslims Anthology. And this book is authored by Professor Aslam Fattar and published by Awqaf South Africa. And this book launch is taking place tomorrow and from 11 to 12:30 p.m. out in Cape Town. It's time now to welcome the author of the book, Professor Aslam Fattar. Professor Aslam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, Brother Inayat. Shukran for the opportunity. Just to tell your audience that I'm having to put the phone close to my ear to hear you, but when I speak, I will bring my face in a better position, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah, perfect for that. Prof, I just want to talk about this book, and obviously very, very interesting because I'm just looking at the book itself. Talks about a whole range of issues, a collection of essays, and addresses some very, very critical issues. Let's just get an overview of this book from yourself, Prof.
MashaAllah, Brother Inayat. I wrote this book over 6 years. And they consist of 31 essays. I've written about 50 or 60 essays related to Muslims, related to democracy, related to Islamic societies and their responses to the complexities of the world. 30 of these essays were pulled together into this book, and I wrote a number of essays to frame it, introduce it, and so on and so forth. The focus of the book really is on how Muslims ought to comport themselves or to behave in response to rapidly changing environmental, planetary, artificial intelligence, and social justice context that we're in. And I try to develop an ethical language from the Islamic resource base to speak compellingly into these complexities and to provide some language for our behavior and some guidance, perhaps.
Well, Prof, I think what you are saying is absolutely critical because, you are touching on some very, very critical issues, critical challenges that we are faced with. And in many instances, whether we're talking about social inequality, whether we're talking about war, you spoke about artificial intelligence, which is widely being used at this point in time. Sometimes we are reactive and we are not proactive. And I'm sure this book will go a long way in terms of preparing us on how to respond to some of these challenges.
Yes, mashallah, you've captured it very accurately. What I'm suggesting is that the first port of call in living with integrity in this particular context is to understand how the various dimensions that now constitute living and our life impact us. To understand that, to do intellectual work, to do ethical work, to do conversational work as you are in the industry that you are, to kind of begin to map the context of their influence as well as the conceptual and other dimensions of the influence. So that is the first task. And then the second task is to say, if we want to live as Muslims with ethical integrity in the world, we have to be prepared to think carefully through our Islamic intellectual legacy, our Islamic ethical resources, which is there with us, for us, and to put those into a dynamic conversation with the very specific ways in which we are currently living. And out of that, we establish a conversation that empowers us, that empowers the individual, that empowers the community to live properly and with integrity in the world.
Yes, Prof. Interesting that you speak about an intellectual Islamic legacy. And this is a point that I personally have been making over a period of time in terms of how do we engage, because we are part of a wider society. We are part of a global village. And particularly for us in South Africa, what I've observed is we need works like these. We need a book like this to not only keep us informed, but more importantly to engage. But also, what is lacking in South Africa is a think tank, because these are challenges that we face with on a day-to-day basis, and these challenges are just growing. And sometimes, sadly, we find that we don't have the answers and we are not able to respond.
MashaAllah, yeah. So what I'm suggesting is that we have to embark upon individual and collective intellectual exertion and intellectual work in this regard, in order to understand how these dimensions of AI, of injustice and genocide, and planetary transitions are now impacting our lives, ourselves, and our communities. We need to put our heads together. This is not a task for one or two persons in this field or that field, but it's a task that brings multi-disciplines together, both in the religious sciences, in the human sciences, in the social sciences, in the natural sciences, in the hard, both environmental engineering sciences, and in the artificial intelligence and data and computational sciences, so that you are able to establish an interlocking conversation amongst all of these bits and pieces of expertise. No one has the answer. And when you put, but the question is what will animate the response from these various components. The question simply is, how do we establish Islamic ethical living within the complex world that we currently are in? It is an unashamedly intellectual question, and yet it is a question that calls on us to, with integrity, to bring together, and with modesty, to bring together all the various discipline and component parts to this conversation. And your last point, the point that you started off with, is that there are multiple intellectual traditions that we are mired in, that other people are putting on the table, that other people are, and other traditions, intellectual traditions and ethical traditions, are advancing in response to this question. Islam has an ethical tradition that runs back 1400 years, 1450 years, and it is in front of us, and yet we are impelled now to ask fundamental questions about how we apply that tradition to current day 21st century circumstances.
Yes, Prof. And also, I think the other important aspect to note, and you speak about a multifaceted approach, and also I'm certain that intellectually we are not short in any way in terms of resources, in terms of skills, in terms of people, intellectuals themselves who are able to address these issues. It's just a question of coming together, and I'm sure with this book launch and with what the contents and what is contained in this book will actually go a long way to serve even as a form of a textbook, for us to progress as a Muslim society, and more importantly in addressing these challenges.
MashaAllah, Brother Inayat, that is exactly the invitation of the book. It is the awareness that we have expertise. In Arabic, it is called tahassus in various areas, in the religious sciences, in the social sciences, in the natural sciences, and so on. And that if we display a wide-ranging openness, a non-judgmental capaciousness, meaning everyone on board, no one excluded by virtue of where you come from. If you have an intellectual contribution to make, you're invited in, and space is made for your voice, academic, your expert voice, to be heard. And it is in the invitation, and then in the listening, and then in the synthesis that we develop, out of which we can begin to understand how we proceed in the world and how we begin to educate our communities, schools, and so on and so forth. The time for us to speak in boxes, insular, afraid of each other's cleverness. This is not a time for valuing the cleverest in our communities. There is no such a thing. There are only voices that knows this bit of expertise and that bit of expertise. The intelligent response is to bring all of them, to invite everyone in, and to answer the questions in a disciplined way, in a patient way, in a compelling way, and in a productively practical way, to understand how we will move this debate forward into our communities so that they are capacitated and empowered to respond with integrity in the world from an Islamic ethical perspective.
Well, Prof, just adding to what you're saying, and in confronting these moral challenges, and I'm sure, again, this book speaks about confronting them with compassion, with truth and justice. And sadly, we are living in a world, sadly, we are living in this country where we see that compassion actually lacking. Sometimes our own prejudices overshadow everything else. And this is the reason why we cannot truthfully address these challenges. We don't do it with justice and we don't do it with compassion.
Brother Inayat, the Islamic ethical tradition, in the argument that I advance in the book and in the various essays, emphasizes Islam's etiquette tradition, Islam's adab tradition, the tradition of beauty and excellence, the tradition of compassion and generosity, the conditions of Allah's love, as the fulcrum and the defining feature of the way we behave in the world. And and the challenges that's confronting us are now so overwhelming. Remember that artificial intelligence, in the way it is being monetized, has already captured our bodies. It has taken over some of the autonomy that we may have had to make decisions. It's constructing certain decisions and choices for us, lifestyles for us, and so on. What the Islamic ethical tradition says is that it understands that, it recognizes that for what it is, but it intervenes with the kind of Islamic moral integrity to understand how you retain your balance, you retain your human centeredness and your autonomy to decide how to live in the world with justice, especially when injustice overrides relationships, injustice overrides behavior of people, behavior of nations, behavior of communities, and so on, where in the Islamic ethical tradition goes the other way. But we have to put that tradition in conversation with all of these injustices, with artificial intelligence. Otherwise, we are going to fail to respond to what is happening to us in this particular moment in time.
Well, certainly is the case. But, Prof, you know what? You've actually whet my appetite to actually get my hands on this book because I'm sure there's so much that to take in from what you have written. And let's just talk about the book launch in itself. Now, we know it's due to take place tomorrow in Cape Town as well. And it is going to be launched or hosted by Shafiq Morton, people like Najwa Noordin Fattar, and Abdul Dayan Peterson discussing this book. What can be expected at the book launch itself?
MashaAllah. Yeah. So OCA South Africa, which is one of the most prominent organizations in South Africa that is founded on the Islamic civilizational mission and advancing intellectual and social work in relation to that, is hosting the book launch. They've also generously produced the book. The book will be launched tomorrow at 11 o'clock at the Homecoming Center, which is a very historic center in the heart of District 6, tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And Mikhail Collier, the OCAV Executive Director, will be speaking. Shafiq Morton will be moderating. And Najwa Nuruddin Fattar and Abdul Dayan will be responding to me. What I will be doing is that I will be providing a context for the book and the substantive direction that the book is taking us into. And then we will invite the audience, to participate. Mikhail from OCAF has just indicated to me that there will also be book launches in Johannesburg and in Durban, because his argument is that the book is one thing, the conversation is another, and we have to get people interacting vigorously with the kinds of things that the book raises and many other things besides.
Well, absolutely. I think I'm quite glad that you mentioned that there will be a book launch in Joburg, which is something that we definitely are looking forward to up here in the north, Prof. And for me personally as well, you know, as I mentioned, you've whet my appetite. You have generated a lot of interest because these are critical issues. We are living in very critical times. We're living in difficult times. We're living in uncertain times. And uh, sometimes we at a loss and we don't know where to go, who to turn to as well, and what our sources are. And I'm sure this obviously is going to go a long way. So we wish you well for the book launch as well. Inshallah, we hope that it sells extremely well, but more importantly, it is about adding value in the lives of the people that this book obviously speaks to, but more importantly, it is about humanity. It is about where we are as a Muslim ummah and where do we want to take this Muslim ummah.
Shukran jazakumullah, brother Inayat. Thank you very much for hosting me this morning. I would not hesitate to return back and engage more in the substance of the book, inshallah. I wish you and your readers all of the very best, and Jumu'ah Mubarak to you, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Professor Aslam Fattar with us this morning, the author of the book Cultivating an Ethics of Beauty and Excellence in Planetary Times, an engaged Muslims anthology and addressing a number of issues. And this book is published by Awqaf South Africa as part of its Leaders and Legacy series, which aims to tell the stories of our community leaders, stalwarts, our politicians. And this book obviously addresses a whole host of issues, critical issues that you and I are talking about on a day-to-day basis. It talks about inequality, it talks about war, it talks about digital disruption, AI, as Professor Aslam Fattar spoke about, and also more importantly, uh, to prepare us, to prepare us to confront the moral challenges that we are faced with on a day-to-day basis. But more importantly, how do we confront these challenges? Are we allowing our prejudices to take over? Are we being confrontational? And this is what Professor is saying. We need to address these challenges with compassion, with truth, and with justice. We're going to go for a quick break. We'll be back.